Hello and welcome to this video demo on OmniVista's new template-based provisioning feature. Let's get straight to the point. This is the setup that I'm using to demo this new feature in OV 4.4R2. I have an OmniSwitch 6450, which is the switch that I want to provision, and it is connected through dual uplink ports to a distribution layer switch. On that distribution layer switch, I have configured the two ports as an LACP aggregate, and on that lag, I have tagged VLAN 127. There's an IP interface on this VLAN 127, which will act as the default gateway for the newly provisioned switch. And I also enabled the DHCP relay to forward requests to a centralized DHCP server. When we power up a factory default switch, there is no boot.cfg in it, and this prompts the switch to do a few things. The first thing it will do is try to automatically configure its uplinks as an LACP aggregate if it receives LACP PDUs from the upstream switch. Then it will create a DHCP enabled IP interface on VLAN 1 as the untagged default VLAN and request an IP address. If it doesn't receive an IP address within 30 seconds, it will try again, but this time it will use tagged VLAN 127 instead. It retries a couple times, alternated between these two VLANs. There's also a possibility of using a different VLAN number, which the upstream switch can specify through LLDP. But in my setup, it will succeed on VLAN 127 because that's the way I set it up. At the DHCP server, the scope is configured with certain DHCP options, and in particular, there's option 43, which specifies the activation server. There's a tech brief available on Spacewalkers, which explains in detail how to configure this option on both Windows and Linux servers. So I invite you to check it out. But in a nutshell, setting this option will instruct the switch to use as-light.myovcloud.net as the activation server. Then on the DNS server, we need to create an entry for as-light.myovcloud.net, and this entry has to resolve to the OmniVista IP address. Again, all details are in the tech brief. With this info, the switch will then say hello to the OmniVista server. OV will use a rule matching logic to determine what profiles need to be applied to this particular switch and apply them. After that, the switch will be configured and manageable from OV as well as the CLI. Let's see this in action. Here we are on OmniVista, and I want to start by showing you the release, which is 4.4R2. That's the current release. And in this release, there's a new menu, and that's the provisioning menu. Once we click there, the first thing to pop up is the rule matching logic. We can choose to match on the switch serial number, the MAC address, or the switch model. In my testing, I've been using 3 different switches, and I've chosen to match on the switch MAC address. Let's have a look at one of those switches. Let's pick the one at the top. And what I want to show you in particular is the switch configuration template. So I'm going to click there. And here it is. This is the configuration that OmniVista is going to push to this particular switch. Something to point out is that this configuration is stacked on top of any configuration that the switch automatically creates during the boot up process. And in our example, that includes the lag, the VLAN 127, the IP interface for management, which is set up for dynamic addressing. If any of that we want to change or remove, it's just a matter of adding the CLI command to that effect within the template. For instance, if we wanted to use static IP addressing for management, then we could do that. The second thing is that when we see a character string preceded by the $, that means it's an attribute, and the actual value for the attribute is taken from another profile that I'm going to show you next. Then other than that, I'm doing housekeeping, disabling VLAN 1 and naming the VLAN that I'm using for management. So let's cancel out of this, and the next profile that I want to show is the value mapping profile, and this profile has an entry for each attribute that we define in the configuration template. And this one has only one, which is the system name, and for this particular switch It's the name that we see there, and at the bottom is going to show me the result of replacing that value in the template. The third template that I want to show is the management user template. So this is the user that OmniVista is going to create for SNMP management. Once the switch is provisioned with this template, it's going to be added to the inventory and managed like any other switch within OmniVista. So let's try it. I'm going to connect to the switch through the console. I'm going to log in, and to simulate a factory default configuration, I'm going to wipe out the config from the working directory. So we're gonna go there to the working directory. Let's have a look at what's there. We have 3 config files, so I'm gonna remove them. Let's check that they're gone. Yes. And next I'm going to reload from the working directory. We're gonna say yes, and the switch is gonna go through the motions of a reload, and that's gonna take a while, so I'm gonna pause the recording until it's back online. And thanks to video editing, that was really fast. So we're back on OV. If I go to network and provisioning, we see now that the status has changed from setup to matched, and that's a good thing. I want to show you a couple things before carrying on with the rest of the provisioning features. So I want to go to the inventory, so manage devices, and here's the list of OV managed devices, and if I scroll to the bottom, I'm going to find here the switch that we just provisioned, and we see that it's showing the right name, and that's a good thing. The next thing I want to show you is a backup job that was automatically configured. So resource manager, backup, restore, and there it is. This has been automatically created as part of the provisioning process. So let's click and check the details. So that's the backup job. And if I scroll to the bottom, it's showing that it's taking place every day at midnight. Okay, so with that, we can go back to the provisioning menu. So network, provisioning. And the next submenu I want to show is the results submenu. And from this menu, we can audit the switch configuration against a golden configuration. And for our switch, we see the status is no audit result, and that's because we firstly have not audited the switch, and also we haven't defined a golden configuration yet. So that's what we're gonna do. And here I can select a configuration from a previously taken backup. We only have one backup in this case because the switch is new. So those are the 3 files that have been taken as part of the backup. We can check, and if I click on the boot.cfg, what we see there is the result of stacking the automatic configuration and the template that was applied on top. So let's cancel that. And yes, we will select this configuration and apply it as the golden configuration. If I audit against this golden config, obviously it's gonna be compliant because nothing has changed. So before I audit, I'm gonna make a change to make it non-compliant. So for that, we go back to the console, we log in, and we can make any change. So I'm gonna change the system name to something else. And then I'm going to save this. So now I can go back to OmniVista. And now I will select it and audit. And right away, it's showing that something is different. And if I click there, it's showing me where the change is. So I'm gonna cancel out of that. I also have the option of enforcing the golden configuration again, or marking this configuration as the new golden configuration. But I'm not gonna do any of those options. I'm gonna cancel out of this, and I'm simply gonna change it back to what it should be through the console again. So I'm gonna find the command, there it is, and I'm gonna change it to what it was. So b1-ax-200. Gonna save it again. Gonna go back to OV, and now I'm gonna run the audit again. And sure enough, this time nothing has changed. And if I refresh, then it's showing me that the config is in sync, which is good. And that brings me to the end of the demo. To recap, we reviewed the auto provisioning process. We saw how to use the 3 different provisioning templates, as well as how to define and audit against a golden configuration. I hope this has been useful, and thank you for watching.